The warning signs are everywhere, but most Americans are sleepwalking toward disaster. State governments are drowning in debt, infrastructure is crumbling, populations are fleeing, and entire economies are built on sand. These aren't minor shortfalls, they're signs of systemic collapse. This kind of breakdown turns thriving communities into ghost towns. Services vanish, public safety evaporates, families scramble for the exits. And it's not speculation. It's happening right now, with the dominoes already falling. Today, we're exposing 10 states racing toward collapse by the end of 2025. This isn't politics, it's hard data. Financial reports, population trends, infrastructure assessments, and demographic shifts all tell the same grim story. When a state collapses, everything changes. Tax revenue disappears, schools close, police and fire services shrink, hospitals reduce staff, roads and bridges fail. Businesses flee, professionals follow, retirees cash out, and property values crater. Some of these states will shock you. Others have been teetering for years, all of them are running out of time. Number 10, Connecticut. The Constitution state is facing an unconstitutional mess of financial obligations that threaten to bankrupt the entire government. Connecticut's debt burden is absolutely staggering. We're talking about over $20 billion in bonded debt, plus another $35 billion in unfunded pension liabilities. That's more than $55 billion in total obligations for a state with only 3.6 million residents. Do the math. That's more than $15,000 of debt for every single person living in Connecticut, including newborn babies. The state's bond rating has been downgraded multiple times, making it more expensive to borrow money right when they need it most. Connecticut's economy is hemorrhaging jobs and businesses. General Electric fled to Boston. Aetna moved to New York. Dozens of hedge funds and financial firms have relocated to Florida, Texas, and other low-tax states. Each departure takes millions in tax revenue and hundreds of high-paying jobs with it. The tax situation is a death spiral. Connecticut already has some of the highest income taxes and property taxes in the nation, but raising them further just accelerates the exodus of wealthy residents and businesses. Meanwhile, cutting spending means reducing services that residents depend on, which makes the state even less attractive. Here's the demographic nightmare. Connecticut's population is aging rapidly while young people leave in droves. College graduates from Yale, UConn, and other state universities are taking their degrees and heading to states with better job markets and lower costs of living. The result is fewer working-age taxpayers supporting more retirees who need expensive services. Hartford, the state capital, is already essentially broke. The city has been bailed out multiple times by the state government, but those bailouts just transfer the problem to a higher level. When your capital city can't pay its bills, that's not a good sign for the rest of the state. Number 9, Rhode Island. The ocean state is drowning in an ocean of debt and dysfunction. Rhode Island might be the smallest state, but its problems are massive. The state's pension system is a complete disaster, with unfunded liabilities that grow larger every year despite multiple reform attempts. Rhode Island's economy never really recovered from the 2008 financial crisis. Manufacturing jobs disappeared and never came back. Tourism helps, but it's seasonal and doesn't generate the year-round revenue needed to support government operations. The state's ports and shipping industry face increasing competition from larger facilities in nearby states. Providence, the state's largest city, has been struggling with corruption scandals and budget crises for years. Multiple mayors have been convicted of federal crimes, and the city's finances are a mess of creative accounting and deferred obligations. When your biggest city is politically unstable and financially shaky, it drags down the entire state. The tax burden in Rhode Island is crushing small businesses and middle-class families. Property taxes are among the highest in the nation, while income taxes and sales taxes keep climbing. Business taxes are so high that companies regularly relocate across the border to Massachusetts or Connecticut, taking jobs and revenue with them. Here's what makes Rhode Island's situation particularly dangerous. The state is so small that losing even a few major employers or wealthy residents has an outsized impact on the budget. There's no economic diversity to cushion the blow when things go wrong. Number 8, Illinois. The Prairie State is more like the broke state, and Chicago's problems are dragging the entire region toward financial catastrophe. Illinois has been flirting with junk bond status for years, and the state's credit rating is the worst in the nation. The pension crisis alone could bankrupt Illinois even if everything else went perfectly. Chicago is hemorrhaging residents faster than almost any major city in America. The murder rate, while improved from its peak, is still driving families and businesses away. High taxes, corruption scandals, and declining city services are accelerating the exodus. When people leave Chicago, they usually leave Illinois entirely. The state's population decline is accelerating. Illinois lost more residents than any other state in recent years, with most heading to Florida, Texas, Tennessee, and other states with lower taxes and better business climates. Each person who leaves takes their income tax, property tax, and spending with them. Illinois politicians have been kicking the pension can down the road for decades, but they're running out of road. The state's retirement systems are among the most underfunded in the nation, with obligations that grow faster than the economy or tax revenue. Public employee unions have contracts that guarantee benefits the state simply cannot afford. Here's the toxic combination. Illinois needs to raise taxes to pay its bills, but raising taxes drives away more residents and businesses. Meanwhile, cutting spending means reducing services and breaking promises to public employees, which creates political chaos and legal challenges. The manufacturing sector that once drove Illinois' economy has been devastated by foreign competition and automation. Agriculture is still important, but it doesn't generate enough high-paying jobs or tax revenue to support a modern state government. Springfield, the state capital, has become synonymous with corruption and dysfunction. Multiple governors have been convicted of federal crimes, and the legislature seems incapable of making tough decisions about spending and taxes. Number 7, New Jersey. The Garden State's garden is wilting under the weight of impossible financial obligations and a mass exodus of residents and businesses. New Jersey has the highest property taxes in America, and they keep climbing as the state desperately tries to fund bloated government operations and generous public employee benefits. The pension crisis in New Jersey makes other states look responsible by comparison. Decades of underfunding and overpromising have created a hole so deep that even massive tax increases couldn't fill it. The state has tried pension reforms, but existing obligations are locked in by contracts and court decisions. New Jersey's geographic position should be an advantage, sitting between New York City and Philadelphia with access to major ports and transportation networks. But high taxes and hostile business regulations have turned that advantage into a liability. Companies are fleeing to Pennsylvania, Delaware, and other states where they can operate more efficiently. The state's infrastructure is literally falling apart. Roads are among the worst in the nation, bridges are structurally deficient, and the transit systems serving New York commuters are unreliable and expensive. Fixing these problems would require massive investments the state can't afford. Atlantic City was supposed to be New Jersey's economic salvation, but casino revenues have been declining for years as gambling expands to other states. The city has been through multiple bankruptcies and bailouts, and several major casinos have closed permanently. Here's New Jersey's demographic death spiral. Wealthy residents are fleeing to Florida, leaving behind a smaller tax base to support the same level of government spending. Young people can't afford to buy homes because property taxes make home ownership prohibitively expensive. The result is an aging population with fewer workers supporting more retirees. The pharmaceutical and chemical industries that once anchored New Jersey's economy are consolidating operations and moving manufacturing to states with lower costs and fewer regulations. Each plant closure eliminates hundreds of high-paying jobs and millions in tax revenue. These states represent just the beginning of our countdown. Each one faces a unique combination of financial crisis, population decline, economic stagnation, and political dysfunction that threatens to trigger complete collapse by the end of 2025. But the worst is yet to come. The top 6 states on our list are dealing with problems so severe that collapse isn't just possible, it's practically inevitable. Number 6, New York. The Empire State's empire is crumbling from within, and the collapse could send shockwaves across the entire northeastern economy. New York's fiscal situation is a masterclass in how to destroy a once great state through decades of mismanagement and political pandering. The numbers are absolutely terrifying. New York State government spending has exploded to over $200 billion annually, making it one of the most expensive state governments in America. Meanwhile, high tax revenue is becoming increasingly volatile as wealthy residents flee to states like Florida and Texas, where they can keep more of their income. New York City's problems are dragging down the entire state. The city's budget has ballooned to over $100 billion, larger than most entire state governments. Public employee costs are out of control, with pension obligations and healthcare benefits consuming an ever-growing share of the budget. The subway system alone needs over $100 billion in repairs and upgrades that the city simply doesn't have. Here's where it gets really ugly. New York's tax base is incredibly concentrated among high earners who can easily relocate. The top 1% of taxpayers provide nearly half of the state's income tax revenue. When even a small percentage of these wealthy residents leave, it creates massive budget holes that are nearly impossible to fill. The exodus is accelerating. New York lost more residents than any other state except California in recent years, and most of those leaving are taking significant income with them. The pandemic accelerated remote work, making it easier than ever for high earners to live in low-tax states while keeping their New York salaries. Upstate New York is in even worse shape than the city. Cities like Buffalo, Rochester, and Syracuse have been declining for decades as manufacturing jobs disappeared. These areas have aging populations, crumbling infrastructure, and shrinking tax bases that can't support basic government services. The state's regulatory environment is suffocating businesses and driving away investment. Energy costs are among the highest in the nation due to aggressive environmental policies that sound good politically, but devastate the economy. Manufacturing companies are closing plants and moving operations to states where they can operate profitably. New York's debt burden is staggering and growing. The state has over $50 billion in bonded debt, plus massive unfunded obligations for pensions and healthcare. The Metropolitan Transportation Authority alone has over $40 billion in debt that taxpayers will be paying off for decades. Number 5, California. The Golden State has lost its luster and is rapidly becoming a cautionary tale of how progressive policies can destroy even the most naturally advantaged regions. California's problems are so massive and interconnected that collapse seems almost inevitable. The homelessness crisis has turned major cities into unlivable dystopias. San Francisco, once a jewel of American cities, now has human waste maps and needle cleanup crews. Los Angeles has tent cities that stretch for miles, creating public health emergencies and driving away businesses and residents who can afford to leave. California's tax burden is crushing the middle class, while the ultra-wealthy find ways to minimize their obligations or simply relocate. The state's income tax rates are the highest in the nation, and property taxes on top of sky-high home prices make home ownership impossible for average families. The business exodus from California is unprecedented in modern American history. Tesla moved to Texas. Oracle relocated to Texas. Hewlett-Packard Enterprise left for Texas. Dozens of other major corporations have announced plans to move operations to business-friendly states. Each departure takes thousands of jobs and millions in tax revenue with it. California's infrastructure is falling apart despite massive spending on politically connected projects. The high-speed rail boondoggle has consumed over $20 billion with little to show for it. Meanwhile, roads are full of potholes, bridges are seismically unsafe, and the electrical grid regularly fails during hot weather or high winds. The state's water crisis is becoming existential. Decades of environmental extremism have prevented new reservoir construction, while population and agricultural demands keep growing. During drought years, entire communities run out of water, while politicians blame climate change instead of addressing infrastructure needs. California's pension obligations are completely unsustainable. The California Public Employees Retirement System alone has unfunded liabilities estimated at over $100 billion. State and local governments are paying an ever-increasing share of their budgets to retired employees while cutting services to current residents. Here's California's demographic disaster. The state is losing middle-class families and young professionals while gaining low-income residents who consume more government services than they pay in taxes. The result is a shrinking tax base trying to support expanding obligations. The regulatory environment has made California hostile to business and innovation. Environmental reviews can take decades. Permitting processes are Byzantine and expensive, and labor regulations make it nearly impossible to operate profitably. Companies that built California's economy are fleeing to states where they can actually function. Number 4. Oregon. The Beaver State is busy building its own dam to economic prosperity, and that dam is about to burst. Oregon's transformation from a quirky but livable state to a dysfunctional mess has accelerated dramatically in recent years. Portland, once considered one of America's most desirable cities, has become a symbol of urban decay and political extremism. Violent protests, homelessness, and defunded police have turned downtown into a no-go zone for many residents and tourists. Major retailers are closing stores, restaurants are shutting down, and property values are plummeting in once desirable neighborhoods. Oregon's tax system is completely broken and getting worse. The state has no sales tax, putting enormous pressure on income and property taxes that are driving away residents and businesses. Meanwhile, ballot measures keep passing new spending obligations without identifying sustainable funding sources. The state's environmental policies are destroying its traditional economic base. Logging restrictions have devastated rural communities that once thrived on timber harvesting. Fishing regulations have crippled coastal economies. Energy policies are driving up costs for manufacturers and forcing them to relocate to more competitive states. Oregon's population growth has stalled as people flee high costs and deteriorating quality of life. Young professionals are leaving for cities with better job markets, and lower crime retirees are C rates, ashing out expensive Oregon homes and moving to states where their money goes further. The state's pension system is heading for disaster. Oregon's public employees' retirement system has unfunded liabilities that grow larger every year despite multiple reform attempts. Local governments are cutting essential services to make pension payments to retirees who often collect more in retirement than they earned while working. Rural Oregon is in complete economic freefall. Small towns that depended on natural resource industries are dying as environmental regulations make traditional economic activities illegal or unprofitable. There are no replacement industries, and young people are leaving for opportunities elsewhere. Oregon's infrastructure is crumbling faster than a house of cards in an earthquake. Roads in rural areas are reverting to gravel because counties can't afford asphalt repairs. Bridges built in the 1960s are structurally deficient, but there's no money for replacements. Water systems in small towns are failing, and some communities have been placed under boil water advisories that have lasted for months. The state's mental health and addiction crisis is spiraling completely out of control. Drug decriminalization policies have turned Portland and other cities into open-air drug markets where people shoot up heroin and smoke fentanyl on sidewalks in broad daylight. Treatment facilities are overwhelmed, and emergency rooms are packed with overdose cases that consume massive resources. Here's Oregon's political death spiral. The legislature is controlled by politicians who prioritize ideological purity over practical governance. They pass laws that sound progressive but devastate the economy and drive away the taxpayers needed to fund government operations. Meanwhile, rural counties are so fed up they're voting to leave Oregon and join Idaho. Number 3. Washington. The evergreen state's economy is withering, despite being home to tech giants like Microsoft and Amazon. Washington's problems run so deep that even massive corporate tax revenues can't solve them. Seattle has become a poster child for urban dysfunction. The city that once symbolized American innovation and prosperity now struggles with rampant homelessness, open drug use, and property crime that's driving away residents and businesses. Downtown Seattle looks like a zombie apocalypse movie, with boarded-up storefronts and tent encampments on every corner. Washington's tax system creates wild revenue swings that make budget planning nearly impossible. The state relies heavily on sales taxes and business taxes that fluctuate dramatically with economic conditions. During recessions, revenue plummets just when demand for government services spikes. The state's environmental extremism is destroying its economy. Hydroelectric dams that provide clean, cheap power are being removed to satisfy environmental activists. Meanwhile, energy costs are skyrocketing as the state mandates expensive renewable sources that don't work when the wind doesn't blow or the sun doesn't shine. Washington's housing crisis is pushing middle-class families out of the state entirely. Home prices in Seattle and surrounding areas have reached levels that make home ownership impossible for teachers, firefighters, and other essential workers. Meanwhile, rent control policies and tenant protection laws are driving small landlords out of the market, reducing housing supply and making the crisis worse. The state's ferry system, which connects island communities to the mainland, is falling apart. Aging boats break down regularly, leaving entire communities stranded. The Washington State Department of Transportation doesn't have money to replace the fleet, and service cuts are becoming routine. Rural Washington is being systematically destroyed by policies designed to benefit Seattle liberals. Logging communities are dying as environmental regulations shut down mills and prevent forest management. Agricultural areas face water restrictions that make farming unprofitable. Fishing towns watch their harbors empty as regulations destroy the commercial fishing industry. Number 2. Alaska. The last frontier might become the first state to completely run out of money. Alaska's economy is almost entirely dependent on oil revenue, and that foundation is cracking under pressure from multiple directions. Oil production from Alaska's North Slope has been declining for decades, and new exploration is blocked by federal environmental policies. The Trans-Alaska Pipeline, which generates most of the state's revenue, is operating at a fraction of its capacity. When oil prices drop or production falls, Alaska's budget gets devastated immediately. Alaska's population is actually shrinking as young people leave for opportunities in the lower 48 states. The harsh climate, isolation, and limited economic opportunities make it difficult to attract new residents or retain existing ones. Each person who leaves reduces the tax base while increasing the per capita cost of government services. The state's infrastructure challenges are unique and expensive. Everything costs more in Alaska because of the remote location and harsh weather conditions. Roads, airports, and communication systems require constant maintenance and replacement. Small communities rely on expensive air transport for basic supplies, making the cost of living prohibitively high. Alaska's Permanent Fund, which pays annual dividends to residents, is being rated to balance state budgets. Politicians are using one-time oil revenues to fund ongoing government operations, creating a structural deficit that gets worse every year. When the oil money runs out completely, the state will face immediate bankruptcy. The federal government owns most of Alaska's land, making economic development nearly impossible without federal approval. Environmental groups have successfully blocked most new resource extraction projects, leaving the state with no alternative revenue sources as oil production declines. Alaska's rural communities are particularly vulnerable. Many villages depend entirely on government subsidies for basic services like electricity, water, and internet access. When state budgets get cut, these communities could become completely uninhabitable. Number 1. Hawaii. Paradise is about to become a financial hell that will leave residents trapped on islands they can no longer afford. Hawaii's problems are so severe and interconnected that complete economic collapse seems inevitable. Hawaii's cost of living is the highest in the nation by a massive margin. Housing costs are so extreme that teachers, nurses, and police officers can't afford to live in the communities they serve. Young people leave for the mainland immediately after graduation because there's no path to homeownership or economic advancement. The state's economy is almost entirely dependent on tourism, making it incredibly vulnerable to external shocks. The pandemic showed how quickly Hawaii's economy can collapse when visitors stop coming. Hotel occupancy rates and tourist spending haven't fully recovered, leaving the state with massive budget deficits. Hawaii's energy costs are astronomical because the state imports virtually all its fuel from thousands of miles away. Electricity rates are more than double the national average, making it expensive to operate businesses or even live comfortably. The state's renewable energy mandates are driving costs even higher while making the electrical grid unreliable. The state's infrastructure is failing catastrophically. The Red Hill fuel facility contaminated drinking water for hundreds of thousands of residents. Roads are falling apart because asphalt and construction materials have to be shipped from the mainland at enormous cost. The rail project in Honolulu has consumed billions of dollars while delivering virtually nothing. These 10 states are racing toward a cliff, and there's no turning back. From Connecticut's crushing debt to Hawaii's paradise lost, the warning signs couldn't be clearer. The collapse isn't coming, it's already here. The only question is whether you'll be prepared when the dominoes finish falling and America's map gets redrawn forever.